The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched so far that Daniel Grant could barely see the opposite wall. Hundreds of alien species filled the massive room, each one representing civilizations that had traveled the stars for thousands of years. Some looked like insects the size of trucks. Others were made of crystal that glowed with inner light. A few were just clouds of gas held together by force fields. They all had one thing in common. They thought they were better than humanity. Daniel stood at the small podium reserved for provisional members. His hands held a datapad containing his carefully prepared speech. He had worked on it for 6 months, making sure every word was perfect. Earth wanted full membership in the Galactic Council, and this was their chance to make it happen. For the past 80 years, humanity had done everything the Council asked. They paid tribute every year, even when it hurt their economy. They followed every rule, even the ones that made no sense. They sent their best people to work on Council projects across the galaxy. Earth had earned this moment. Daniel began his speech. He talked about the human doctors who had saved millions of alien lives. He mentioned the engineers who kept stations running smoothly. He listed the teachers, the farmers, the technicians, and all the other humans who made life better throughout Council space. He got about 2 minutes into his speech before the laughter started. It began with Kreth, the representative from the Vrex Empire. Kreth looked like a praying mantis that had grown to 8 feet tall. His laugh came out as a clicking sound that the translation device turned into mocking human laughter. Within seconds, the entire chamber filled with the sounds of hundreds of species laughing in hundreds of different ways. Daniel stopped talking. He stood at the podium and waited for the laughter to die down. It took almost 3 full minutes. Kreth spoke first, his voice dripping with contempt. "You want a seat on this council? Your species has been in space for less than 100 years. Some of the civilizations in this room have colonies older than your entire written history. What makes you think you belong here?" A crystalline being named Veshra added her thoughts. She was from the Althean Collective, a species that considered themselves the intellectuals of the galaxy. "Humanity offers nothing special to the Council. You sell ordinary goods. You use technology that others invented. You live on unremarkable planets. Tell me, Ambassador Grant, what exactly do you bring to this council that we cannot get elsewhere?" Daniel tried to respond, but Kreth cut him off. "Let us vote and be done with this waste of time. All those in favor of granting Earth full membership?" Not a single hand, tentacle, or appendage rose in support. All opposed? The chamber filled with affirmative responses in countless alien languages. The decision is made. Earth's application is denied. Kreth sounded bored, as if he had already forgotten about humanity. But he was not finished. Zephyrim, a counselor from the Korthan Empire, stood to make a new proposal. The Korthans looked almost human except for their silver skin and black eyes. They controlled the largest military in the galaxy, and they knew it. "I move that we adjust Earth's provisional status," Zephyrim said. His voice was smooth and cold. "Their current tribute is clearly insufficient for the privileges they enjoy. I propose we triple their annual payment. Additionally, all human vessels should require council escorts when traveling through controlled space. We cannot have such a primitive species wandering freely." Veshra agreed immediately. "A reasonable precaution. Who knows what damage they might cause with their limited understanding of proper protocols?" The vote happened quickly. The measure passed with barely any discussion. A few minor species abstained, but nobody voted against it. Why would they? Humanity meant nothing to them. Daniel Grant closed his folder. He picked up his data pad and tucked it under his arm. He straightened his jacket and checked that his tie was properly centered. Then he walked toward the exit. He did not shout. He did not protest. He did not show any anger on his face. He simply walked out of the chamber in complete silence, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Behind him, the council had already moved on. Kreth was proposing new mining rights in some distant system. Veshra was complaining about trade tariffs. Zephyrim was discussing military exercises near the border worlds. Not one of them gave humanity another thought. Daniel made his way through the crystal corridors of the council station. Other humans working there saw his face and knew immediately what had happened. They did not ask questions. They just nodded at him as he passed. When he reached the docking bay where the human ship waited, his assistant Kevin Morris was there. Kevin was young, only 25, and this was his first major diplomatic assignment. He looked at Daniel with hope in his eyes. "How did it go, sir?" Daniel shook his head once. That was all the answer Kevin needed. They boarded the ship in silence. The captain, a woman named Susan Hill, took one look at them and started the launch sequence without being asked. Within 10 minutes, they were clear of the station and heading back toward Earth. Only then did Daniel allow himself to sit down heavily in his chair. He looked out the viewport at the massive council station growing smaller behind them. Kevin sat across from him waiting. They laughed, Daniel finally said. They laughed at us like we were children asking to sit at the adult table. Then they tripled our tribute and added new restrictions on our ships. Kevin's hands clenched into fists. That's not right. We've done everything they asked. We've helped them. I know, Daniel interrupted. He sounded tired. But they don't care. To them, we're just useful primitives. We fix their machines and grow their food and save their lives, but we'll never be their equals. Not in their eyes. The ship traveled in silence for a while. Kevin kept looking at Daniel, clearly wanting to say something but not sure what. Finally, Daniel pulled out his datapad again. But instead of opening his rejected speech, he started writing something new. Something very short. Kevin watched him type for maybe 2 minutes before Daniel sat back and read over what he had written. What is that, sir? Kevin asked. A message to send to the council, Daniel replied. His voice was calm now, almost peaceful. We're going to tell them that we acknowledge their decision. We'll thank them for the opportunity to participate, and then we're going to withdraw our application and terminate our provisional status. We're done with them. Kevin's eyes went wide. We're leaving the council? Completely, Daniel confirmed. He sent the message before Kevin could ask any more questions. But sir, what about all the treaties? The trade agreements? The research partnerships? We have humans working all over council space. Daniel looked out the viewport again. Stars stretched in all directions. Countless worlds waiting to be explored. Most of them had nothing to do with the Galactic Council. We'll recall everyone, he said quietly. Every human working for the council, every researcher on their stations, every technician maintaining their equipment. We'll bring them all home, and then we'll see how long the council keeps laughing. Kevin did not understand yet. None of them did. But they would. Soon enough, everyone would understand exactly how much humanity had been holding together. 3 days after Daniel Grant walked out of the council chamber, a simple message arrived at the council's administrative headquarters. The message was 1 page long. It was polite and professional. It contained no anger, no threats, and no demands. The United Earth government acknowledges the council's decision regarding our membership application. Effective immediately, Earth withdraws all applications for membership and ends its provisional status. We thank the Council for the opportunity to participate in galactic affairs. We wish all member species prosperity and success. The message was signed by Secretary of External Affairs Paul Jensen. That was all. Nothing else. The junior administrator who received the message filed it in the appropriate database and marked Earth's status as withdrawn in the system. He did not think it was important enough to bring to anyone's attention. Species came and went from council involvement all the time. Humanity was just another minor civilization that had decided they did not want to pay the fees anymore. The only person who noticed right away was Quelix, a slug-like alien who managed trade contracts in the commercial division. He saw that Earth had withdrawn and groaned. Now he would have to find replacements for about 40 different contracts where humans were involved. It was annoying, but not a crisis. Just paperwork. What Quelix did not know and what nobody in the council understood was how deeply humanity had woven itself into the daily operations of galactic civilization. Humans had not done it on purpose. They had just filled gaps wherever they found them. When someone needed a problem solved, humans solved it. When a job was too boring for advanced species to bother with, humans did it anyway. For 80 years, humans had quietly made themselves useful in 1,000 small ways that nobody had bothered to track. The first sign of trouble came 6 days after Earth's withdrawal. The agricultural station orbiting Bellis 4 sent out an emergency message. The station grew food for 12 billion Vrex citizens on the planet below. It was one of the most important food sources in the Vrex Empire. The message said their hydroponic systems had completely failed. Plants were dying. The backup systems were not working. They needed help immediately or billions would go hungry. The Vrex sent their best agricultural experts to the station. When they arrived, they found all the equipment turned off. Not broken, Just turned off, but when they tried to turn it back on, nothing worked properly. The system kept giving error messages they did not understand. After 2 days of failure, someone finally thought to check who had been running the station. They found that a human woman named Karen Hughes had designed the entire hydroponic network. She had also been the chief engineer maintaining it for the past 12 years. 3 days ago, she had terminated her contract and returned to Earth. She had not sabotaged anything. She had not damaged any equipment. She had simply turned everything off properly and left. The problem was that the system she had built was based on Earth farming techniques that she had adapted for alien crops. The Vrex had never bothered to learn how it worked. They had just let the human expert handle it and forgotten about it. Now their expert was gone, and none of them knew how to run the equipment she had left behind. Similar situations started appearing across Council space. On the medical station near Krelix Prime, doctors discovered that most of their trauma surgery procedures had been written by human physicians. The aliens had been following the procedures for years without really understanding why they worked. When the human doctors withdrew, the aliens tried to continue, but their success rates dropped by 40%. A major transport hub in the Tellus sector ground to a halt because the human logistics coordinator had left. The aliens tried to manage the shipping schedules themselves, but within a week, hundreds of ships were delayed or sent to wrong destinations. The hub had always run smoothly before, so nobody had ever thought about how it worked. Manufacturing plants found that their efficiency had dropped sharply. Investigation showed that human industrial engineers had optimized most of their production processes over the years. The aliens could still make their products, but everything took longer and cost more. Research stations discovered that humans had been contributing to dozens of ongoing projects. Nobody had paid much attention because humans were never the lead scientists. But when the human researchers left, projects stalled. Data analysis that used to take days now took weeks. Equipment that had always worked suddenly needed constant repairs. The Council still did not understand what was happening. They saw individual problems popping up here and there. Each one seemed like a minor inconvenience. They posted job offers to replace the human workers, offering good pay and benefits, but very few aliens applied. The jobs humans had been doing were often tedious and detail-oriented. They required patience and careful attention to boring tasks. Advanced species did not want to spend their time doing that kind of work. That was exactly why they had been happy to let humans do it. Meanwhile, Earth's borders closed to outside traffic. Human ships throughout the galaxy received orders to return home. Trade delegations packed up and left. Research teams withdrew from collaborative projects. Construction workers finished their current contracts and did not renew them. Teachers at multi-species schools resigned. Medical staff at alien hospitals gave notice, and through it all, not a single human official complained. Nobody protested. Nobody demanded anything. They just left quietly and professionally. When aliens asked why they were going, humans gave simple answers. Our contract is complete. We're needed back home. Earth is pursuing a different direction now. Nothing dramatic. Nothing angry. Just polite explanations that revealed nothing. On the Council station itself, human staff began leaving in groups. The cafeteria that served human food closed because the human cooks had left. Several maintenance crews disappeared, and suddenly, sections of the station started having problems with air filtration and temperature control. The translation systems that helped different species understand each other began producing more errors because the human linguists who had been calibrating them were gone. Counselor Vishara noticed when her personal assistant, a human man named Greg Foster, resigned. Greg had worked for her for 7 years. He had managed her schedule, organized her files, and handled the hundreds of small details that Vishara found too boring to deal with herself. "I don't understand," Vishara said when Greg told her he was leaving. "I have always treated you well. Your pay is excellent. Why would you leave?" Greg smiled politely. "You have treated me well, Counselor. I appreciate the opportunity to work with you. But I'm going home now. I'm sure you'll find an excellent replacement. But who will manage my schedule? Who will organize the briefing documents the way I prefer? Who will remember which other counselors I need to avoid in the hallways?" "I've prepared detailed notes on all of that," Greg assured her. He handed her a data pad. "Everything you need is right here." Vishara took the data pad and looked at it doubtfully. The notes were very thorough, but reading through all of them and learning to do Greg's job herself would take time she did not have. She had always just told Greg what she needed and he made it happen. Perhaps I could offer you more money, Vishara suggested. Double your current salary? Greg shook his head. It's not about money, counselor. Earth is going in a different direction. I need to be part of that. He left that afternoon. Vishara tried to manage her own schedule for 3 days before giving up and hiring an Althean assistant. The new assistant was competent, but things were not the same. Files got misplaced. Meetings were scheduled at inconvenient times. Small details fell through cracks. Across council space, the same pattern repeated millions of times. Humans left. Things stopped working smoothly. Aliens tried to adapt. Life went on, but it was harder now. Less efficient. More frustrating. And still, the council did not truly understand. They thought it would blow over. They thought the humans were just upset and would come back once they calmed down. They were wrong. In the council's main assembly hall, Kreth addressed the other councilors about minor trade disruptions. He never mentioned humanity. Why would he? They were insignificant. Their departure was barely worth noting. But in the back of the chamber, a few of the smaller species exchanged worried looks. They had noticed something the powerful civilizations had not. When the humans left, they took something with them, something important, something that might have been holding more together than anyone realized. One of them, an amphibious creature named Polis, whispered to her neighbor. How many humans were working in council space? Her neighbor, a crystalline being named Corthan, checked his datapad. His eyes widened. According to the labor database, approximately 4 million humans held positions throughout council-controlled territory. 4 million, Polis repeated quietly. And they're all leaving? Every single one, Corthan confirmed. They sat in silence, both thinking the same thought but neither wanting to say it out loud. What happened when 4 million competent workers all walked away at the same time? They were about to find out. 6 months after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, Counselor Vishara called an emergency economic session. She had spent weeks reviewing reports from across council space, and what she found disturbed her deeply. The problems were not getting better. They were spreading. The council chamber filled with representatives who looked confused about why they had been summoned. Economic sessions were normally scheduled months in advance. Emergency sessions only happened during wars or natural disasters. Vishara stood at the central podium and activated a massive display screen. Numbers and charts appeared, showing economic data from hundreds of worlds. We have a crisis, she announced. Her crystalline body flickered with an orange glow that indicated stress. 6 months ago, humanity withdrew from council space. At the time, we treated this as a minor administrative matter. We were wrong. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Kreth's mandibles clicked with irritation. Surely you did not call an emergency session to discuss a departed provisional member. Humans were irrelevant to our operations. Were they? Vishara challenged. She changed the display to show a map of the Vrex Empire. Large sections glowed red. 12 agricultural stations in your territory are operating at 60% capacity because the human engineers who designed and maintained them are gone. Food production is down. Prices are rising. Your citizens are complaining. Kreth started to object, but Vishara continued. The Corthan shipyards have reported a 30% decrease in production efficiency. Medical facilities across 17 systems have seen their patient outcomes decline. Trade routes that used to run on precise schedules are now experiencing constant delays. Education test scores have dropped in 42% of multi-species schools. Should I continue? She let the silence hang for a moment before answering her own question. The common factor in all of these problems is the absence of human workers. We did not realize how deeply they had integrated themselves into our civilization because we never paid attention to what they were actually doing. A counselor from the Mentac Directorate spoke up. He was a gaseous being contained in a specialized suit. Surely we can simply hire other species to replace them. The work cannot be that complicated if humans could do it. Vishara's glow shifted to red, indicating anger. That is precisely the attitude that created this problem. We assumed that because humans were relatively new to space travel, they must be inferior. We were arrogant and foolish. She pulled up new data on the screen. We have tried to replace human workers. The response has been minimal. Do you know why? Because the jobs humans were doing are considered undesirable by most advanced species. Detailed logistics planning, repetitive maintenance tasks, long-term agricultural management, meticulous record-keeping. These are jobs that require patience, attention to detail, and a willingness to do unglamorous work. An Althean counselor named Threx spoke up. Surely our own people can handle such simple tasks.
Can they?
Vishara challenged. 3 months ago, the Althean Education Ministry tried to replace human curriculum designers with our own people. I have the results right here. Student performance has declined by 28%. Your own ministry is now requesting emergency funding to address the crisis. Threx's crystalline form dimmed with embarrassment. Vishara continued her presentation, pulling up example after example. On the medical station orbiting Krelix Prime, alien doctors had discovered that every successful treatment for Thanari viral infections in the past 20 years had been developed by a human research team. The lead researcher was a woman named Lisa Monroe, and she was now back on Earth. When a new outbreak occurred, the alien doctors tried to use the old treatment protocols. They failed. After dozens of deaths, someone finally read through Dr. Monroe's research notes properly. They discovered that she had not just created treatments. She had developed an entirely new understanding of how Thanari immune systems worked. The aliens had been using her treatments without ever understanding the science behind them. The Korthan Empire faced a similar revelation in their military shipyards. For 40 years they had been building warships using increasingly efficient processes. They had assumed this was due to their own engineering excellence. The truth was more humbling. A human efficiency expert named Roger Blake had been quietly optimizing their assembly procedures since before most of the current workers had been hired. He had never made dramatic changes. He just made small improvements, hundreds of them year after year. The Korthans had implemented his suggestions without really thinking about where they came from. Roger had left 6 months ago. The shipyards could still build vessels, but the elegant, streamlined process they had taken for granted had vanished. Ships that used to take 8 months to complete now took 11. The pattern repeated across every sector of Council civilization. Humans had not been leaders in any field. They had not held prestigious positions or controlled major industries. But they had been everywhere in the middle layers of society, doing the detailed work that kept everything running smoothly. We need to bring them back, Kreth finally admitted. His voice had lost its earlier arrogance. What do they want? More money? Better trade terms? We can negotiate. Veshara shook her head. I already sent a formal communication to Earth requesting dialogue. They responded within a day. She displayed the message on the screen. It was short and polite, signed by Secretary Paul Jensen. Earth appreciates the Council's interest in opening dialogue. However, we are currently focused on internal development and are not seeking external agreements at this time. We wish the Council well in addressing their current challenges. The chamber filled with shocked voices. Several counselors began speaking at once. Vishara had to call for order 3 times before the noise settled down. They refused? Krith sounded genuinely confused. They simply refused to talk to us? They did, Vishara confirmed. And there is nothing in our protocols for how to handle a species that simply does not want to engage with the Council. We have procedures for conflict resolution. We have frameworks for negotiating with hostile civilizations. We have systems for bringing new species into our alliance. But we have no mechanism for dealing with a species that is just not interested in us. She paused to let that sink in. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council has been the center of civilization. Every species wanted to be part of it. Every culture sought our approval. And now, for the first time, a species has looked at what we offer and decided they would rather be alone. A small counselor from one of the minor species raised a tentacle. Perhaps we were too hasty in rejecting their membership application. Could we not simply invite them to join now with full status and no requirements? We can try, Vishara said, but I suspect they will refuse that as well. Think about it from their perspective. We laughed at them. We insulted them. We tripled their tribute and added restrictions to their travel. We treated them as inferiors. And when they quietly left, we did not even notice for weeks. Why would they want to be part of an organization that treated them that way? Kreth's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep thought in Vrek's body language. What are they doing now? Since they left? Vishara pulled up intelligence reports. Our information is limited because they have closed their borders to outside traffic. But what we can gather suggests they are thriving. Their colonies are growing. Their economy is expanding. They are developing new technologies without sharing the information with us. What kind of technologies? Threx asked nervously. We do not know for certain, Vishara admitted. But there are reports of human vessels using power systems that exceed our standard models by significant margins. Their research stations are publishing papers in their own databases that we cannot access. They appear to be innovating at a rate that should not be possible for such a young civilization. She changed the display to show a graph. Here is something interesting. This shows the rate of new patents and research publications from human scientists over the past century. For 80 years, the line is relatively flat. Then 6 months ago, right when they left council space, it suddenly spikes upward. In the past 6 months, humans have registered more new innovations than they did in the previous 5 years combined. How is that possible? Someone asked. I have a theory, Vishara said quietly. For 80 years, humans worked within our systems. They used our approved technologies. They followed our standards and protocols. It made them compatible with council civilization, but it also limited what they could do. They were always trying to fit their solutions into our framework. Now they are solving problems their own way, without worrying about our rules, and apparently their way works quite well. The chamber fell silent as the councilors absorbed this information. Finally, Zephyrim of the Korthan Empire spoke. His silver face showed no emotion, but his voice carried a weight it had not before. We need to accept a difficult truth. Humanity does not need the Galactic Council, but it appears that the Galactic Council needs humanity. Nobody argued with him. 18 months after humanity left the Galactic Council, Commander Jake Harrison guided his patrol ship along the edge of human territory. His mission was simple: check on the colonies near the border and make sure they were safe. It was routine work, but Jake never minded it. He liked seeing how humanity was doing now that they were on their own. The first colony he visited was New Boston, a settlement of about 50,000 people on a planet that had seemed unremarkable when humans first arrived. The council had called it a marginal world, barely worth terraforming. Now, as Jake's ship approached, he could see that the humans living there had transformed it. The colony administrator, a woman named Betty White, met him at the landing pad. She was in her 50s with gray hair and a friendly smile that made Jake feel immediately welcome. Commander Harrison, she greeted him. Perfect timing. We just finished installing our new power grid. You have to see it. She led him to the central power station, chattering enthusiastically the whole way. Jake learned that New Boston had been struggling with energy production for years. The council-approved fusion reactors they had been using were expensive to maintain and barely produced enough power for the colony's needs. Then about 6 months ago, our lead engineer started experimenting, Betty explained. She figured since we weren't bound by council technology standards anymore, why not try something different? The new power station looked nothing like the old one. Instead of massive fusion reactors, it used a hybrid system that combined solar collection, geothermal energy, and something the engineer called quantum resonance batteries. I don't really understand how it works, Betty admitted cheerfully, but I know it produces 40% more power than the old system, costs half as much to maintain, and we built it entirely from materials we mined right here on the planet. No imports needed. Jake was impressed. Has anyone else started using this design? Oh yes, Betty said. We shared the plans with 15 other colonies last month. They're all building their own versions now. That's the nice thing about not being in the council anymore. We can actually share our innovations freely instead of going through their technology licensing boards. The pattern repeated at every colony Jake visited. Without council restrictions on what they could develop or build, human innovation had exploded. Scientists who had spent years working within galactic standards were now free to experiment. Engineers who had been forced to use approved components were designing their own. Farmers were developing new techniques specifically suited to their local conditions instead of following universal protocols. At the research station orbiting Kepler's Ridge, Jake met with a scientist named Amy Walsh. She was young, probably in her early 30s, but she spoke with the confidence of someone who had made important discoveries. We've had a breakthrough in quantum computing, Amy told him, pulling up schematics on her display. For years, we were trying to make our systems compatible with council networks. It was like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Our approach to quantum processing is fundamentally different from theirs. How so? Jake asked. Amy's eyes lit up with excitement. Council quantum systems use crystalline matrices because that's what the Altheans developed first, and everyone else just adopted their standard. But we've been experimenting with organic neural networks. It's messy and unpredictable by their standards, but it works better for the kind of problems we want to solve. She showed him test results. The new human quantum computers were faster than council models for certain tasks, and they could be manufactured for a fraction of the cost. "Are you sharing this with the council?" Jake asked. Amy laughed. "Why would we? They never shared their innovations with us without charging licensing fees. Besides, I sent a paper to a council science journal about 3 years ago. They rejected it without review because the approach didn't fit their theoretical framework. Said it was impossible and that I didn't understand basic quantum mechanics." She pulled up another screen, showing the current performance data from her impossible computer. "Turns out I understood it just fine. They were just too rigid to see that there might be more than one way to solve a problem." Jake visited agricultural worlds where farmers had developed new crop varieties that produced yields far beyond what council science said was possible. He toured manufacturing facilities that had redesigned production processes to be more efficient than anything in council space. He spoke with doctors who had made medical breakthroughs by approaching alien biology from a uniquely human perspective. Everywhere he went, the story was the same. For decades, humans had been trying to fit into the council's way of doing things. Now they were doing things their own way. And it turned out their way worked remarkably well. But it was not just about technology and innovation. Jake noticed something else that was harder to quantify but just as important. The people seemed happier, more confident. They walked with their heads held higher. On the agricultural world of Green Valley, he had dinner with a farming family. The father, a man named Carl Jensen, put it into words over dessert. "When we were part of the council, we always felt like we had to prove ourselves," Carl said. "Like we were constantly being judged and found wanting. Every time we tried something new, there was some regulation saying we had to do it the approved way. Every time we succeeded, it felt like we'd succeeded in spite of being human, not because of it." His wife, Linda, nodded agreement. "Now we're just free to be ourselves. If something works, we use it. If it doesn't, we try something else. We don't need permission from aliens who think they know our own planet better than we do." Their teenage daughter added her own thoughts. "In school, we used to learn about how the council races had been exploring space for thousands of years, and humans were so far behind. It made me feel small, like we would never really measure up. Now we learn about what humans have accomplished, and it makes me proud." Jake understood what they meant. There was a psychological weight that came from constantly being treated as inferior. When that weight lifted, people flourished. Back in council space, things continued to deteriorate. The economic problems had stabilized somewhat as the council adapted to human absence, but they had not recovered. More concerning was the loss of innovation that Veshra had identified. For thousands of years, the council had been the center of scientific progress in the galaxy. New discoveries spread through council networks. Research built on research. The whole civilization moved forward together. But that system had depended on constant input from many species, each contributing their unique perspectives. Humanity had been one of those contributing species, and without them, the rate of innovation had noticeably slowed. The council tried to compensate by increasing funding for their own research programs. It helped, but it was not enough. They were missing something important, and most of them did not even realize what it was. The problem was that council science had become rigid over the millennia. There were approved ways to approach problems, standard methodologies, accepted theoretical frameworks. It produced reliable results, but it also meant that truly novel approaches were rare. Humans had not been bound by thousands of years of tradition. When they encountered a problem, they tried unconventional solutions. Sometimes those solutions failed, but when they worked, they opened up entirely new areas of research. Now that source of innovation was gone, and the council was slowly realizing how much they had depended on it. Kreth himself visited a Vrex military research facility to review their newest warship designs. The engineers proudly showed him schematics for a ship that would be faster and more powerful than previous models. But as Kreth reviewed the details, he realized something troubling. The design was based on incremental improvements to existing technology. It was a better version of what they already had. There was nothing revolutionary about it. Nothing that would make other civilizations look at it and wonder how the Vrex had achieved such a breakthrough. 20 years ago, A Vrex warship design had incorporated human-developed shield harmonics that had surprised everyone with their efficiency. 15 years ago, human metallurgists had helped create a new hull alloy that set a new standard. 10 years ago, human systems engineers had revolutionized the layout of command and control systems. This new design had none of that innovative spark. It was competent but uninspired. "Where are the revolutionary features?" Kreth asked the lead engineer. The engineer, a young Vrex named Thex, looked confused. "Counselor, this design improves on every metric from our previous model." "Yes, but it is merely an improvement. Where is the innovation that makes other species take notice?" Thex's mandibles clicked nervously. "Counselor, we followed all approved design methodologies. This is what those methodologies produce." Kreth realized the problem. The methodologies were sound, but they would only ever produce incremental improvements. True innovation required thinking outside those established frameworks, and the species most willing to do that had been humanity. He left the facility feeling deeply troubled. The Council was still powerful, still advanced, still dominant in the galaxy, but they had lost something important, and Kreth was not sure they could get it back. 5 years after the Galactic Council laughed at humanity's membership application, Daniel Grant returned to the Council chambers. But this time he was not a supplicant hoping for acceptance. He was a representative of a sovereign civilization coming to discuss a potential partnership between equals. The chamber looked exactly the same as Daniel remembered. The same crystalline walls stretched into the distance. The same hundreds of species filled their designated spaces. But the atmosphere felt different. There was a tension in the air that had not existed 5 years ago. Daniel noticed immediately that human-designed efficiency protocols were visible throughout the building's operations. The scheduling systems, the environmental controls, even the traffic flow in the corridors all showed signs of human influence. The Council had not asked permission to copy these methods. They had simply started using them because they worked better than what they had before. It was a small thing, but it told Daniel everything he needed to know about how much had changed. Counselor Vishara opened the session. Her crystalline form glowed with a neutral blue that Daniel's briefing materials said indicated professional courtesy. She had learned not to show condescension when dealing with humanity. "Ambassador Grant, welcome back to the Council chambers. We appreciate your willingness to meet with us." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you, Counselor. Earth is always willing to discuss mutually beneficial arrangements with other civilizations." The phrasing was deliberate, not grateful for the opportunity, not honored to address the Council. Just a simple statement that Earth was open to discussions that served their interests. Kreth spoke next. His voice carried none of the mockery it had held 5 years ago. "Ambassador, the Council has authorized me to extend a formal offer. We would like to grant Earth full membership with immediate seating. No probationary period, no tribute requirements, no restrictions on your vessels or trade. Full membership with all rights and privileges." It was an extraordinary offer. Several minor species in the chamber shifted with surprise. Full membership without any prerequisites was almost unheard of. Daniel let the offer hang in the air for a moment before responding. "The Council is generous. However, I am not here to discuss Earth's membership in the Galactic Council." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Vishara's glow shifted to orange, indicating confusion. "Then why are you here, Ambassador?" "I am here to present an alternative framework for Earth's relationship with the Council," Daniel explained. He activated a display showing a detailed proposal. Earth has developed what we call the Independent Associates Framework. It would allow for cooperation between our civilization and Council species while maintaining complete Earth sovereignty. He walked them through the proposal. Human experts would work with Council species on specific projects, but as independent contractors hired for their expertise, not as subjects of Council authority. Technology sharing would be bilateral and reciprocal, negotiated on a case-by-case basis. Trade would be conducted as equals with no tribute or special restrictions on either side. Most importantly, Earth would maintain complete control over its own territory. Technology development and foreign policy. No Council oversight. No Council laws applying to human space. No Council authority over human activities. Essentially, Daniel concluded, Earth would be a partner to the Council, not a member of it. The chamber erupted in debate. Dozens of councilors began speaking at once. Vishara had to call for order multiple times before the noise settled down. Zephyr of the Korthan Empire was the first to speak once order was restored. These terms are highly irregular. The Council does not typically engage with non-member species as equals. Our entire structure is based on a hierarchy of member civilizations. Then the Council is free to decline our proposal, Daniel said calmly. Earth will continue on our current path. We have proven over the past 5 years that we do not require Council membership to prosper. It was not a bluff. Everyone in the chamber knew it was not a bluff. Human colonies were thriving. Their economy was growing faster than most Council members. Their technology was advancing at a remarkable rate. They had everything they needed within their own territory and their own capabilities. Kareth's mandibles clicked slowly. And if we agree to this framework, what would Earth offer in return? Access to human expertise and innovation, Daniel replied. He pulled up statistics showing human advances in various fields over the past 5 years. Our scientists have made significant breakthroughs in quantum computing, power generation, agricultural science, medical research, and materials engineering. We are willing to share these advances with Council species for fair compensation and under negotiated terms. You would sell us your technology? Threk sounded offended. The Council has always shared scientific knowledge freely among members. The Council shares knowledge among its members, Daniel corrected. But Earth would not be a member. We would be an independent associate. And yes, we would license our technology rather than give it away, just as we would expect to pay fair prices for Council technology that we wish to use. An uncomfortable silence filled the chamber. For thousands of years, the Council had been accustomed to newer species eagerly sharing their innovations in hopes of gaining favor and status. The idea of actually having to pay for technology felt wrong to many of them, but several of the more pragmatic counselors were already calculating the benefits. Access to human innovation, even at a cost, was better than no access at all. And the Council had vast wealth. They could afford to pay for what they needed. The debate continued for 3 days. Daniel spent most of that time in a comfortable waiting room, reviewing reports from Earth, and occasionally meeting with individual counselors who wanted to discuss specific aspects of the proposal. On the second day, Kareth visited him privately. The Vrex counselor looked older than Daniel remembered, though it was hard to tell with insectoid features. I underestimated your species, Kareth said without preamble. We all did. Daniel nodded acknowledgement. You saw us as we appeared to you, not as we actually were. We were small, so you assumed we were insignificant. We were cooperative, so you assumed we were weak. We were useful, so you assumed we were dependent on you. And now? Kareth asked. Now we are exactly what we always were, Daniel replied. The only thing that has changed is your perception. Kareth's mandibles clicked, and what Daniel had learned was the Vrex equivalent of a rueful laugh. When you walked out of this chamber 5 years ago, I thought you were just angry. I expected you to come back within a few months, asking to rejoin on any terms. I never imagined you would simply build your own future and leave us behind. We did not leave you behind, Daniel corrected gently. We just stopped waiting for you to acknowledge our worth. There is a difference. On the third day, the vote was held. The Independent Associates framework passed with a narrow majority. Many council members had voted against it, unable to accept the idea of treating a species they still considered inferior as an equal partner. But enough pragmatic voices had prevailed. Earth would be the first civilization in galactic history to have a formal relationship with the Council without being subject to Council authority. After the vote, Daniel prepared to leave. But Vishara approached him one last time. Ambassador Grant, I must ask, why did you not simply refuse all contact with us? You could have continued on your own path without any ties to the Council. Daniel considered the question. Because isolation is not our goal. Humanity has always believed that we are better when we work with others, when we share ideas and learn from different perspectives. We left the Council not because we wanted to be alone, but because the terms of engagement were unacceptable. And now the terms are acceptable? Now the terms are equal, Daniel said. That is all we ever wanted. Not special treatment, not favors or concessions, just to be treated as equals with our contributions valued and our sovereignty respected. Vishara's crystalline form flickered with a color Daniel had not seen before. His briefing materials said it indicated deep thought and reevaluation. We owe you an apology. When you first applied for membership, we were arrogant and dismissive. We judged you not by what you had accomplished, but by how long you had been doing it. That was wrong. The apology is appreciated, Daniel said. But what matters now is how we move forward. He left the council chambers for the second time, but this time he walked out as an equal. Behind him, the council was already discussing how to implement the new framework, how to adapt their systems to work with humanity as partners rather than subjects. Back on Earth, Secretary Paul Jensen addressed the United Assembly to explain what had been accomplished. The chamber was packed with representatives from every human colony, all eager to hear about the new relationship with the Galactic Council. We did not defeat the Council, Paul explained. We did not humble them or take revenge for their initial dismissal. We simply showed them the truth. We never needed them as much as they needed us. Sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is not anger or confrontation. It is simply quiet competence. He paused to let that sink in. 5 years ago, the Council laughed when we applied for membership. They saw us as primitive, as inferior, as